there's this feeling a lot of times with people who are people pleasing that I can either be powerful and I can be direct and I can get what I want, ask for what I want, make a stand, or I can be nice, but I can't be both at the same time.
Welcome to the Industry of UX, a podcast crafted to review, share, and discuss the ins and outs of the user experience industry. Let's dive into the episode. Hello, and Happy New Year. Welcome to another episode of the Industry of UX. I'm your host, Filippo Lavotti, and I'm glad to be here in this new 2021 chapter with you all. We want to start the year strong and positive, and there's no better way to do that than having our first conversation of 2021 with a Chief Uplift Officer, Hayden Humphrey. Hayden broke through the script of a corporate career at LinkedIn to become a self-employed success coach and creative entrepreneur. Hayden spent the last 3 years on a healing path from people-pleasing to the point where he became a coach himself to help others unlock their full potential. One of the great things about Hayden's coaching, and the main reason why I loved our chat, is that he tackles very real issues that we see people discuss about UX over and over again. Issues like people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, and isolation. I talk about these very real issues with my mentees, and I see them on Reddit and LinkedIn on a daily basis. Hayden and I tried to get to the source of the problem, UX style, and explore how we can get ourselves on a healing path. Let me know what you thought about the episode by leaving a comment on theindustryofux.com or by tweeting at IndustryUX. Okay, on to the conversation with Hayden. The first thing I wanted to ask you is the fact that one of your official titles on LinkedIn is Recovering People Pleaser. And I like how that is at the same time brutally honest, but somewhat provocative. And it's definitely one of those things that made me want to chat with you in the first place. How did your recovery from people pleasing start?
It's a great question. It's so funny. I get so much feedback about that part of my title on LinkedIn. I have so many people who are like that like really resonated with me. I mean, I think the recovering piece just comes from the work that I've been doing, the interpersonal work that I've been doing over the course of the last 3.5 years. It really started when I left my full-time job. I worked at LinkedIn for close to 2 years, first in San Francisco. And then, when I moved to Chicago, and in mid 2017, I decided to leave corporate and go out on my own, which is when I discovered coaching and got really involved in coaching, got trained as a coach, all that kind of stuff. But I would say that was really when my people-pleasing recovery really started. Because the thing about coaching is it really asks you to confront the behavioral patterns that you've been stuck in and confront your blind spots as access to doing something different. Because until you're aware of a pattern or until you're aware of a behavior or a belief that you have, you can't do anything about it. It just continues to run unconsciously in the background. And so that's really been the main benefit for me of being involved in coaching, getting trained as a coach, having a coach, in addition to, the more traditional therapeutic work that I've been doing with a variety of therapists and a couple other types of healing modalities. So it really started in 2017, which is when I really started to invest heavily in my own development and started to invest heavily in increasing my own sense of awareness. And it really picked up for me, or become very, very clear for me, especially this year, given where I'm at in my business, given where I'm at in my coaching journey, my journey in becoming a more masterful coach. I've just started to understand the more nuanced ways that people pleasing gets in the way of the experience of life that I want to have, both in being able to serve my clients effectively by saying the bold thing or reflecting something that might upset them or might make them angry. But it also shows up in my personal life and how I set boundaries with people, like how I set boundaries with my family members, or, how I am upfront with friends and different people people in my life about how they might have upset me or might have hurt me or, whatever it is. And so it started 3.5 years ago. It's become really, really prevalent and a big focus for me this year. And I think, that's the funny thing about recovery is like, it never truly ends. Like this will always be something that I struggle with in some way, shape, or form. All I can do is just work to have it have less and less of an impact on my, day-to-day life.
The other day, I was listening to a podcast where you mentioned that when you were younger, you became accustomed to dealing with certain group dynamics in your family. And you were really good as a mediator to diffuse conflict. I don't remember the exact wording, but the gist is that when a group dynamic was shifting, maybe towards confrontation, you would jump in and try to diffuse the situation. Were those the first experiences that shaped your people-pleasing behavior?
The strategies that we use to navigate life, like the core strategies that we use, come from how we learned about the world originally and initially. And for a lot of people, that is in their family unit. And so, for me, when I think about the house that I grew up in, to what you mentioned, like I was a mediator in my household. So I was the person that brought the levity. I was the person that brought the positivity and the lightness, because there was just a lot of heaviness and a lot of big personalities in my family. And so I sort of felt like the way that I got attention and, the way that I fit in was I was the mediator. I was the peacekeeper. I was the person that had good relationships with each member of my family. So I was sort of like in the middle of that. And one of the skills that I ended up developing was being able to notice when the dynamics of a conversation or the energy of a conversation was starting to shift in a more negative direction, and being able to use humor or being able to use wit or being able to use some infusion of positivity to be able to reorient the trajectory of the conversation. Because I knew if it continued, it wouldn't end well. And so that's sort of how I kept myself safe. Like that's how I kept myself comfortable. That was sort of like the role that I played. And then, as I got older, it wasn't really until after college and, even until I moved to Chicago that I got to a place in my life where I was able to take a step back from these strategies that I had been using and ask myself, like, is this actually how I want to be living my life? Are these strategies the things that I want to empower? And is this identity the person that I want to continue to live into or continue to choose from? Because all through high school and college, it was just more of the same. I was just doubling down on that people-pleasing strategy. It wasn't until I'd had some real-world experience and confronting experiences in my life that I was actually able to take a step back from that, reevaluate, and then decide that I didn't want to continue to do those things. I actually wanted to do things differently. So that's how I got involved in coaching and therapy and have really started to shift that for myself.
It's interesting. We do have a similar experience when it comes to family dynamic. I'm curious, was there a defining moment when your internal switch flipped and you said, that's enough? Or was that a more gradual process? I imagine something along the lines of layers that piled up to a point where the cake got too tall and it collapsed.
It felt like it was a series of experiences and like a series of conversations and decisions that I'd had that sort of led me to this place of, really owning how people pleasing had been running the show and then being interested in having it go differently. And, like I mentioned, I think the thing about behavior and the thing about our identity and the thing about the strategies that we use to navigate life is until we're put in a situation where we can get some distance from it, we'll just continue to use it because that's all that we know. And so I think part of the value for me in going through making decisions like moving to San Francisco first and then moving to Chicago and then leaving my full-time job and going out and, starting my own business, like all of these experiences that were very confronting in the moment, but also very different. Like my social circle changed a lot. My environment changed a lot. All of that contrast actually afforded me the opportunity to say, is this how I really want to be living? Yeah, to your question, I don't think it was one thing in particular. I think it was just as I made more and more decisions that were off the beaten path and to me were a bit more like unscripted, so to speak, I got more and more of an opportunity to look at how people pleasing was running the show and then decide how I, didn't want to do that anymore.
Okay, let's talk about user experience. In our day-to-day, we are constantly pulled in two different directions. On one side, we almost make an unspoken oath vow, if you will, to advocate on behalf of the customers and be on the user side. On the other end, we need to take in consideration the business. Is the solution we are providing bringing both customer and business value to the table? As you can possibly imagine, some companies are more business driven than others. And so the internal company balance between the two shifts to profit over user experience. And I worked in a few of these companies, and I can tell you that the pressure higher ups put on you to deliver to those business metrics wears at you to the point that people pleasing becomes the easy way out. And although we want to advocate and innovate on behalf of the user, we feel we need to please the business or else. How may we frame this situation to stay away from people pleasing?
What I am realizing both for myself and also in the work that I'm doing with people around people pleasing, I finished up a 3-month boot camp that I was running called the Be Bold Boot Camp. And it was specifically around people pleasing and supporting people and breaking up with these people pleasing behaviors. And I think so much of this game is supporting people in understanding that niceness and kindness are two different things. They're not the same thing. And so there's this feeling a lot of times with people who are people pleasing that I can either be powerful and I can be direct and I can get what I want, ask for what I want, make a stand, or I can be nice. But I can't be both at the same time. They feel mutually exclusive or they seem mutually exclusive. And I think what I would offer and what I have really been working to support people in understanding is that they're not mutually exclusive ideas. You can be powerful and you can be kind at the same time. Like things can be said very directly and very flatly. Feedback can be given, criticism can be given, stands can be taken, boundaries can be set in a very kind and loving way. And so, there's no silver bullet in any of this. Like there's no like, hey, here's what to do when you have a problem. But I think the thing that I would offer is how do you advocate on behalf of the customer and do it in a way that is both kind and powerful with your internal stakeholders, with the business, et cetera. Because I think you're spot on, in that the longevity of a business has so much to do with how well you treat customers and how well customers are incorporated into the design and development of a product. And the wider that gap grows, the more likely you are to run into issues as far as long-term keeping customers around and acquiring new customers and that sort of thing. So, in so many ways, like UX, folks who are involved in UX are on the front line. They are the people that have the most valuable asset and the most valuable resource, which is customer feedback. It's like what customers want. Funny to think about. And so I think that there's so much to be said for the folks who are in UX to understand that being nice and avoiding or resisting saying the bold thing is only in service of you staying comfortable, right? So, I'm not going to say this thing. I'm not going to push. I'm not going to be bold. I'm not going to be direct. It's not in service of the customer. And so there's an opportunity to practice being both powerful and kind and understand that that's not going to magically happen overnight. Like you're not going to listen to this podcast and go, oh, I suddenly now know how to advocate on behalf of myself and our customer base. And also, make a difference or do it in a way that is loving and kind and perfect. Like you're going to have to get messy. Like you will have to get messy. You will have to say the wrong thing. You're going to have to get uncomfortable. You have to make yourself vulnerable, but it's all in service of creating a closer connection between the customer and the business, serving the customers in a more effective way. And also consider that this kind of skill set is not just important to the business, but it's also important to your life. It's important for you and all the other relationships that you have in your family and your romantic relationships and everything else that you're doing. Like the ability to stand up for what you want, ask for what you want, be direct, be bold, give feedback, and do it in a way that's compassionate and kind and loving is a skill set that will come in handy for literally the rest of your life.
I love how you make the differentiation between being nice and being kind. It's definitely something that I personally struggle with, and it's the little wins that make me feel I'm slowly getting better. One point that I've seen people bring up time and time again almost pushing back against what you just said, is that's all good and well, but I'm worried I'm going to get fired if I stand up for myself.
There's this very real conversation, right? Like, I can't speak on behalf of anyone who is in that position, but part of what I might invite people to think about is a company that would fire you for advocating on behalf of the customer, really a company that you want to work for? Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know, right? Do you want to work for a company that doesn't want you to do the job that they hire you to do?
I think that then that becomes the thing to trust, is that you being an advocate for the customer experience is a skill set that is valued, highly valued by a number of organizations. And there are a number of organizations who would love to have you, on board. And so it becomes this, well, I think to your point, right, it becomes this easy place to just get stuck, because then if I'm not willing to be bold and take a chance on having things go differently, I just get to sit and complain about how things aren't working, or how I feel stuck, or about how the organization isn't listening. And so it's like, either you kind of sit and suck it up and complain about it, or if you want to do something different, like, you got to be willing to take the risk. You have to be willing to lay something on the line in service of what you feel is important, which is advocating on behalf of the customer.
That is a great point. I feel that not addressing these behaviors eventually leads to something else, or this could actually be the precursor to people pleasing. Let's talk about imposter syndrome. Last week, I recorded a solo episode where I went on Reddit and looked at some of the questions that folks asked on the user experience of Reddit, and one of them was about the imposter syndrome. There may be a few different reasons for us to build up to feeling like an imposter, but I know it's not an uncommon issue. I also know that you have dealt with imposter syndrome with your clients, and I'm curious, how do you normally see it arise, and how may we deal with it?
Well, I think it's super natural and everyone struggles with some flavor of imposter syndrome. A lot of times this also comes up as beliefs of like, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not ready, like whatever your particular flavor is. And I think it's a very real human experience, and it's a very natural human experience, especially when you're being asked to take on a set of processes and activities that either you don't have a ton of experience with previously, because I think confidence is born from competence in a lot of ways. And, at the same time, inside of organizations, it becomes this very tricky game of, am I worth what I'm being paid? Am I worth the work that I'm doing? When you feel like someone else is judging your work, or when you feel like someone else is judging your performance, it almost feels like it's out of your hands in a sense. So I totally understand and get why people fall into imposter syndrome regularly. It's something that I have struggled with in my own coaching with my clients. Like, man, am I worth this much? Can I ask clients to pay me this? Are clients getting real value from me, or, feedback from me? I think a couple of things that have been really supportive for me, first and foremost, is just bringing a lot of awareness to how and when imposter syndrome comes up. Because the first step in making any sort of change, any sort of behavioral change, or changing our identities, changing our behavior, is noticing it. Like, we have to be aware of it first in order to then be able to take action on it or to do something differently. And what I also find is that becoming more aware, like generating insights around the patterns that we're in, or the behavioral loops that we sometimes get caught in, that in and of itself can be enough to have us do something different, or actually like change our behavior. So I think the first step is always just bringing awareness and noticing. So this could literally be like a journaling exercise that you do on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. Like, where did imposter syndrome come up for me today? When did it come up? What did I hear? Or what was my self-talk when I felt imposter syndrome? Like, literally trying to get to the root of what belief was driving your reaction, like what belief was driving that imposter syndrome in the moment, and getting down to the core story of it. So that's the first piece is just noticing, becoming aware, and turning your recognition of it in the moment into an unconscious habit so that you can step in the moment and say, oh, wow, that's that thing that's coming up for me right now. Imposter syndrome is coming up for me, or the I'm not enough story, or the I'm not worthy story is coming up. And then the second piece is choosing to do something different. And this is where a lot of people get stuck because it's easy to read like self-help books, right? It's easy to like do the work and become super aware. And I get caught in this too. And then not actually take the action, like not actually do anything about it. We say in coaching that results, what you want, is insight plus action equals results. So the insight is step number one, but the action is number two. So it's actually being willing to, in the moment, say, I'm going to go about this differently. I'm going to choose different. I'm going to do something different. And that can be really scary because part of the reason that we sit in imposter syndrome is because it's comfortable. We know it. It's like safe in a sense. We know that set of feelings. We know that set of internal thought patterns. And deciding to do something different and in the moment interrupt it and say, I'm not going to give into imposter syndrome here. I'm going to do something different is really scary because we don't know what's going to be on the other side of it. So it requires a level of vulnerability and courage that you just have to be willing to step into. And there's no way with getting more comfortable with it. You literally just have to do it. They say that's what courage is. Courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyways. I think the third thing that I would share after noticing doing something different, the third thing that I would share is creating a deeper relationship with yourself. Imposter syndrome a lot of times is driven by this idea that we're not doing the thing that we're supposed to do, or that who we are isn't enough in the moment for other people's expectations, or whatever it might be. And what I find is a lot of times that's driven by a lack of connection with self or a lack of self-love in a sense. And that's something that you can actively work on at any point in time. So at any point in time, any day, any week, you can sit down and actually take a look at like, what did I accomplish today? What did I accomplish this week? How do I want to relate to myself? Literally write a love note to yourself. That's a practice that I'll give to a lot of my clients is literally write a journal entry and write a love note to yourself as if you were another person. Acknowledge yourself, compliment yourself, flatter yourself, encourage yourself. Like literally speak to yourself in the way that you would speak to a loved one or that you would speak to a friend. Because like I mentioned earlier, part of what keeps imposter syndrome in place is that we have this notion that it's right, that we are an imposter, that we're not enough, that we're unworthy of what we're doing, or we're unworthy of what we're being paid. And somebody might tell you that. It's rare, but somebody might actually give you that feedback. But so often, imposter syndrome's internal. It's how we're relating to ourselves. It's how we're relating to our own level of capability and our own qualification. And that relationship, how we're relating to that, our relationship with that thing is something that we can actively work to develop on our own time and when we do it intentionally.
Yep, exactly. As I said, imposter syndrome sounds a lot like a possible or likely precondition for people pleasing. To feel accepted and feel like I belong in this position or with this status, I feel as if I need to bend over backwards for others.
Yeah, well, if you feel like you're unworthy of being where you are, you're going to look for other ways to belong or be accepted in the group. And one of the ways to do that is to people please. Like one of the ways to do that is to just be really nice to everybody. You're like, oh, I'm the nice person. I do everything for everyone. I'm the helper. Anytime that anyone needs help, I'll help them. I'll be nice to everybody. I'll make everybody's day. And then you get to belong. Then you have a place on the team, in the organization, and you don't have to address this underlying sense of feeling like an imposter.
Something else we deal with, especially this year with COVID, is a feeling of isolation. Most of us in UX are currently working from home or looking for work while at home. Rarely you'll find people required to go to the office right now or in the near future. What are success strategies you have used or you have seen your clients use to combat isolation?
I think the thing that I would offer, or the thing that I would invite you to consider is with isolation, I think it's a function of one, being disconnected, fully disconnected, multifaceted connection, and two, not feeling like your experience is normal. So, from the first piece around multifaceted connection, it's looking at how can you have people be involved in each other's lives in a way that's outside of just the professional setting or outside of just a professional or business oriented conversation. So it could be like, hey, every week we're going to get together and do a happy hour, and there's going to be one person who facilitates or like who is the captain of the happy hour, and they're going to lead all of us through like bonding games or authentic relating games where we'll get to know different facets of everyone's life that we might not have talked about previously. The second point around normalization, I think that what I find is isolating is when we feel like the experience we're having is abnormal or no one else is going through that experience. And so I think being able to provide people an opportunity to have their experience normalized and have other people share like, oh yeah, I'm going through that same thing or I'm struggling with that same thing, can also have a really positive impact on people feeling isolated and hopefully feeling less isolated.
Hayden, thank you so much for joining me today. How can people find you and find out more about you?
Two main things that I'll talk about. Well, first, where people can find me. Website is easiest, so haydenhumphrey.com. I'm also super active on LinkedIn. So if you just look up my name, Hayden Humphrey, I've got a nice little yellow profile picture. So connect with me, talk with me. Would love to chat with you and meet you. The work that I do with people falls primarily into two different avenues. So the first is coaching. So I work as a one-to-one coach. I primarily work with people who are in career transition. So people who feel stuck or unfulfilled, usually corporate professionals who are looking to create an experience of work that is more exciting, that is more fulfilling and authentic and pays them what they're worth. So coaching around that. The second avenue is I've been doing a lot more work recently around LinkedIn. So supporting entrepreneurs and business owners in taking better advantage of LinkedIn, mostly from a content strategy and thought leadership perspective. There's just so much opportunity on the platform right now to generate business. And so it's just supporting people in understanding the tools and strategies they can use to do that.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. The goal here was not to give you a solution, but to make you aware of how these issues start and how some of us start the path to our healing journey. These are complex problems, and each one of us has some personal work to do. As always, the most important step is the first. Thanks to Hayden for coming on the show, and a big thank you to Demi He for the post-production work. If you have any feedback about the episode or the show, you can tweet at IndustryUX or leave a comment on theindustryofux.com. If you really want to help or say thank you from the bottom of your heart, please leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us climb the charts and bring our show to a bigger audience. Last but not least, thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to talking to you next week.